Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome to this live coaching session. Today, we're going to be talking about singles strategy. Next to me here is Kevin Garlington and Megan Garlington. And I need to mute my laptop. Didn't know that was going to start automatically. All right, so we'd love to hear where you guys are watching. Let us know in the chat right down below. By the way, Megan here on her laptop, she's going to be monitoring Facebook. We're live streaming Facebook at the same time. Kevin and I are going to be checking out the YouTube chat. So let us know where you're watching from. And most importantly, let us know in singles, what's your biggest trip up or pitfall or frustration right now? What type of opponent, what type of point situation, what type of pattern is giving you a hard time? We'd love to answer your questions. That's the whole reason why we're doing this. To kick things off, I'd like to talk really quickly about how I recommend you start your singles matches. And I wrote an email about this a couple weeks ago. I'm just going to kind of go over that really quickly. But the main thing, first and foremost, you need to walk onto the court with a plan. I think there's way too many amateur players, especially amateur adult players, that have the attitude or mindset that they're going to get in the car, go to the courts, maybe they're coming from work or whatever, and they're just winging it every time. Every time they walk onto the court, they have good intentions, and they're thinking, well, I need to check out my opponent, right? I need to know what their strengths and weaknesses are. Or even worse, they're thinking, oh, I need to see what's working today. I need to see how my forehand's feeling, how my backhand's feeling, how my serve is feeling. And so they walk out onto the court, and they're literally just kind of grabbing stuff out of the air, making stuff up as they go. And there's no foundation or underlying principle to what they're doing. And so it's just random patterns, random targets, and depending on what's happening with their opponent and with their own game, they're totally different players from day to day. Now, that might not be you exactly, but probably something, what I just described probably resonates with you a little bit. So what I like to call my plan A, number one, needs to be something that you have in your head before you get to the courts. And these should be simple patterns. And the plan A that I recommend for you is as simple as possible. It's really comes down to, from the baseline, when you're engaged in a ground stroke rally back and forth, you basically at any given point in time have one of two main options. You could either play for a cross court shot or a down the line shot. Of course, there's more variation than that, and there's more nuance than that. But broadly speaking, those are your two main options. And everybody knows, if you've been watching videos online for any length of time, that cross court is higher percentage. And for me, kind of a fundamental foundational principle to keep in mind is most points end with a mistake. So if you're the one that's constantly changing direction, and we're going to talk about when and how to change direction, I'm sure at some point. But if you're the one that's going down the line, and then your opponent hits cross court, and you're running over, going down the line again, if you're the one that's trapped in that pattern, and it could be that you are without even knowing it, then just understand that if everything's not really aligning for you that day, if your timing's a little off, if the conditions on the court aren't quite what you like, then you're just playing with fire. You're playing the low percentage patterns. And statistics over time are probably not going to work out in your favor. So from the baseline, your plan A is really simple. Keep it cross court unless you have a really good reason to go down the line. That's it. Keep the ball on plane and send it back where it came from, or change direction to go cross court. If your opponent's hitting a lot of down the line shots, play the high percentage ball. From the net position, if you're attacking the net a lot, if you're in balance and in control, then you can hit the ball away from you and try to angle the ball away, try to finish the point. If you're off balance at all, stretched out, defensive or neutral, then it's best to keep the ball in front of you and not go for an angle. Getting stretched out and going for an angle leaves a lot of open court. So this is your plan A. From the baseline, hit cross court unless you have a good reason to go down the line. When you're at the net and you're stretched out, keep it in front of you. If you have an opportunity to put the ball away, then you can start to angle it away. For me, this is like the base pattern, the base mindset you should have for singles matches. And then from there, there's a million different variations and nuances and and different adjustments that you can make depending on the specifics of that particular day. But you need to walk onto the court with some kind of base plan. And for me, this is as solid as it comes. What do you guys think?
Yeah, no, I agree. That's a great start, because I think totally that so many times players don't have an idea. And a lot of times for my matches, I have a kind of, I don't want to say a system, but I have kind of an outline of how I want to start a match. And then once I get in the match, or even within warm-up, I start adjusting that. So usually it does have to do a lot with hitting balls cross court. But usually in the warm-up, I think it goes back, especially when you're playing singles, is that a lot of times we get so caught up in like ourselves in the warm-up. We're like, oh, my forehand's not feeling, I need more forehands, or my backhand, that we're not thinking or not paying attention to potentially what are some issues your opponent's having. So as I'm warming up, I'm looking for potential issues. So as I start getting in the match, I start adjusting my kind of structure of my game plan. So for me, my forehand's my strength. So I start looking for ways to use that. And it also kind of, I don't want to say trigger, but it kind of puts me in the position of knowing when, if I do need to change directions, what's the best time to do it. That's when I start structuring my plan. We had some, a couple questions, maybe.
James just said in here, I have no, this is exact 100% what I was describing. I have no strategy other than hitting to the direction where my opponent is not. No. So I hit it where they're not. For me is like the quintessential amateur pattern of play. If you want to call it a pattern, it's not really a pattern. It's just picking the most vacant spot on the court and trying to hit it. And that could line up with exactly the wrong patterns of play, meaning it could lead you to exactly the lowest percentage possible targets, which is exactly what we want to avoid. So if that's your only indicator of where to aim, is where your opponent is and where they're not, if you're not taking into account geometry, if you're not taking into account their strengths and weaknesses, if you're not taking into account your own strengths and weaknesses, then it's just playing checkers instead of chess. Like it's just very surface level awareness, very surface level intention behind your shots. And the chances of being, you can be successful, within kind of a micro environment, but being successful match after match after match with that kind of strategy is very, very difficult.
I think people often go to that too. What was it, John, you said?
It was James.
James. I think people often go to that when they're stressed and when there's a lot of pressure.
Sure.
As they start changing directions, they start doing all kinds of stuff that you wouldn't normally do. And I think the biggest thing when you're under pressure is plan A, like he was saying, I always call it simple tennis, is go back to the basics. Go back to hitting the ball cross court, not changing direction a lot, not trying to rush the net, not trying to do anything crazy, but really staying focused on playing simple and concise tennis, because that's going to be your goal, and getting the pressure off if you can rely on that.
Simple tennis.
I have a question from Freddie.
What's up, Freddie?
I think, how do you play against someone who consistently hits the ball hard, flat, and low over the net? Which I think is a great question.
Okay. I like the kind of like, for me, I have all these things made up in my mind that kind of help structure different situations like that. So something I call the theory of opposites. Usually if you have, for me, a player that's so extreme on hitting hard, flat, more than likely they hate or dislike or feel uncomfortable with the opposite, which is high, loopy, change in pace. And usually when you have a player that hits the ball hard and flat, their timing has to be pretty good and they want the ball in their strike zone. So if I find myself in a situation playing somebody hard and flat, I tend to lift the ball more, add more topspin. I want to get them away from the baseline. Those are my first kind of things that kind of ring true to me when I have that type of player. Also, I think it's also a bit of a race, because if I can hit the ball higher with more topspin before they can get a hold of the ball and hit it flat, then I'm in front of the race and they're constantly trying to catch up, finding that ball that they can hit hard and flat. If they hit the ball hard and flat before I can lift it up, then I'm constantly in a race to try to catch back up and buy some time to lift the ball up so I can get them out of their kind of rhythm or kind of like of hitting the ball hard and flat. So that's what I think about. It's like whenever I play somebody and they're so extreme on one side, I go theory of opposites. What's the opposite of that they potentially would not want to do?
Yeah, and I think it goes back to the simple tennis again too. Like if you play your percentages against someone who's playing the ball low, hard, flat, which is low percentage tennis. You want to make them have to win the point. That is the biggest goal. Make them have to hit a winner on you. I mean, to actually win the point. Don't make errors, play really simple cross-court, high percentage tennis.
We answer a slightly different way, and then we'll move on. The worst thing you could possibly do, especially if you tend to play a different style or strategy than low, hard, flat, would be to hit low, hard, flat back and go down the line. That's the absolute worst thing you can do. So like that's on one far end of the spectrum. Oh, I see your low, hard, flat ball, and I raise you another low, hard, flat ball and change direction a bunch. Like, oh, I can. That's kind of like the male, like macho, like, oh, I'm going to go toe to toe. I'm going to beat him at his own game. And that's Kevin, I think, hit the nail on the head, and Megan as well, kind of combining those percentage along with contrasts. If instead you play their game, is what so many amateur players do, is they kind of get they kind of fall for the trap of thinking that they've got to beat their opponent in their game instead of making them play yours. And so if you try to just feed it right back to them and go and try to hit winners, then chances are you'll end up beating yourself, which is exactly what they would hope that you would do.
Got a couple questions. Noticing got a lot of like juniors on the call or on the webinar today. So tennis fan, number 16 boys in boys 12's middle states. Could you please talk about being a pusher? And I think just to combine a question, Logan.
There's pushers in junior tennis?
Logan added on to add on to the question, in high school tennis, most players hit without patterns or thinking about their shots. It's all random? How can I deal with kind of that frustration? And the first thing I would say is, especially to the core of the questions, how to beat pushers. The first thing for me, it's a mindset, is that when we play a pusher, a lot of times we go, oh, you're a pusher, you're not playing tennis. And what I look at it is they're playing a strategy because it's effective. And I think the first thing we have to get out of this, it's not tennis. Yeah, it's not the type of tennis I want to play, but they're doing it on purpose because they've become very successful at doing it. And so I look at, what is a pusher trying to do? Usually it's trying to push me away from the baseline. It's trying to take the ball out of my strike zone, not allowing me to hit whatever type of shots I want to hit. It turns into a game of patience, of me kind of, if I'm just going to play their game, going back and forth. So first of all, kind of to answer the question, you have to know your style of tennis. So if you're another pusher, talking about playing a pusher, it just might be a really long match. But I go back to kind of like what I talked about earlier, theory of opposites. If I'm playing a pusher, they're pushing probably because they don't like certain things, aka they probably don't like the net. They probably don't like getting into more harder struck rallies, and they just want to lift the ball up. They're going to probably just want to stay out there all day. So the first thing is I think about, how can I start bringing them in to test that out? So early in a match, I might slice the ball in the middle of the court, and I see, do they come up and hit it and run to the net, or do they hit it and run back? If they hit it and run back, I go, yes. Because then I'm gonna bring them up to net. I'm gonna bring them where they don't want to be. And obviously, if they're pushing, they feel really comfortable way back on the baseline behind the court, just lifting the ball up. The other thing I would do is you have to develop hopefully a swinging volley, so you can come in and take some those balls out of the air and put more pressure on them. But you have to be careful, because that's a lot of pushers like that, like someone coming at them and them being way behind the baseline. If that doesn't work, I go back to that first plan, which is bring them in, make them feel uncomfortable. So I hope that kind of wraps it up. Maybe you guys have there's tons of things you can do. So maybe you guys can shed some light on.
Just a couple of things to add. I would say that, again, sorry, I saw something move over there. Somebody hiding behind the dry erase board. First of all, I met Megan. Kevin really briefly touched on kind of mental mindset. You've got to come in mentally prepared for a battle. Like they will do absolutely anything to stay in a point. They have zero shame about, not that they should be ashamed, but the attitude among tennis players is they should be, because they use a lot of times different looking techniques, different looking types of patterns and shots. Other names for pushers include like hackers, dinkers, moonballers, etc. So they may not, as Kevin said, they may not play the type of tennis that you think is good tennis, but it's irrelevant, because there are no bonus points for style. There are no bonus points for amount of spin or power or how good your outfit is or how new your racket is or anything else. All that matters is hitting the ball on the court. And that's why pushers are so frustrating, because they're really, really good at just hitting the ball on the court one more time. And so mental mindset is key. You have to be ready to grind with them. You've got to have a base level of consistency or else you have no chance at all. And then you have to be able to pressure them, as Kevin was pointing out. And depending on your kind of style and your strengths and weaknesses, what that pressure is might look a little bit different. It might look like offensive balls from the baseline. It might look like swing and volley. Might mean just bringing them out of their comfort zone, not even necessarily hitting the ball hard, but making them do something that they're not comfortable with doing. What else do you have, Megan? Any other thoughts on pushers?
No, I think it's all about time. I think that's the big thing is taking away time. The more time, especially in juniors, especially in girls juniors. If you can learn to hit a swinging volley and take away time from your opponent in girls juniors at 10, 12s, even 14s, it's huge because the girls 10s and 12s match can last 4 hours for 2 sets.
Well, yeah, I was going to say, yeah.
So, okay, so I find Danielle asks about, I've been hearing a lot of comments regarding ball pace and hitting pace. Last week, my opponent said, I put great pace on the ball. Does she mean I change pace, control the pace? What is all this pace talk about? So I think the biggest thing that, and obviously I don't know what your opponent was exactly referring to, but if you're just talking strictly pace, it's just speed of the ball, like how fast the ball is coming at you. Could mean that you're hitting with good topspin and that the ball is actually moving once it hits the ground a little faster. It could mean that you're hitting the ball harder. I don't know exactly what she was talking about, but I think that's the biggest thing is when she's just saying like good pace, that's what it is, the speed of the ball. Anything to add?
No, I mean, pace is kind of one of those tricky things because it could also be kind of the style of the way someone hits the ball. If someone hits the ball pretty flat and the ball skids, it does seem like it comes faster. It could be that they just hit the ball harder. They swing harder. They put more behind the ball. So it's kind of one of those tricky things that I feel like whenever you talk about pace, I think about time. It's just usually they're hitting the ball in the fashion that probably disrupts your swing. You don't have enough time to do your complete swing. So it feels like the ball's coming really fast.
Okay, I have another one. When should you hit high percentage safe shots, or when should you drop shot around the net post and lob to the baseline corners?
Whoa, high percent. I mean, I think when should you hit high? When the question was again?
I think it's really when should you be aggressive? When should you pull out those shots that you're really going for, that kind of thing? And when should you be a little safer when you're playing?
Tell me what you think about this.
Okay.
In my opinion, you should only play as aggressive as you have to. Meaning, if you're a 2-5 player, there's zero offense necessary to win. And I mean literally zero. If you're a 2-5 player, just getting the ball on the court will win you the match. Nothing fancy, nothing powerful. Don't need a lot of spin. Don't need anything, really. Just hit the ball on the court. At 5-0, you can't win that way because your opponent now has significant weapons and skills. They have pace, they have placement, they have spin. And so between 2-5 and 5-0, we have a sliding scale of efficacy. And at 4-0, you might be able to win a lot of matches just getting it in with very minimal offense. At 4-5, you can't get away with that as much. And so you need to know your opponent. And in my opinion, you should only be trying to push the issue and be offensive to the degree that you have to win. Again, like kind of go back to my opening spiel, I think a base principle is understanding that most points end in a mistake. So I think managing your level of aggressiveness in offense is really key. Because if you're trying to hit twice as aggressive as you have to, then you're probably shooting yourself in the foot to a certain extent and losing a lot of points for yourself without your opponent having to earn them. So it depends on your level of play, and something that you should be mindful of and making adjustments for every opponent and point by point, honestly.
No, I agree. I think sometimes we try to do more than we need to. We try to either play macho tennis when you know, if you kind of like, I think of levels of kind of like aggression. My first level of aggression is just get the ball in. I mean, if that's all you have to do, just get the ball in. My next one would be, hey, get it to a weakness. You know, so I haven't really jumped that much. My next one would be, hey, let's try to move them and then maybe move them to a weakness. And then my third one would be, let's take time away, which is the toughest one, but it's also the last thing I would do, which is take the ball early, maybe, or combine them. I mean, there's so many different ways of doing it, but definitely I start off at the lowest level and then work my way up only if at the lowest level, I'm not winning enough points to make it count. So basically what he said.
Do you guys have one?
Yeah, I got a bunch of stuff. Let's see. From Scott, what are some clues you look for to indicate opponents' weaknesses during a warm-up?
I'll take it.
Yeah, this is a good one. There's so many different like
ones.
little
I'll take a few
meta like things you can look for.
Okay, so the first, I'll make it short because I'll let everybody chime in. The first thing I do, which is my favorite, I feed the first ball in the warm-up right to their body, and I want to see which shot they choose. You're always going to try to choose the shots that you love the most. So if they love their forehand, more than likely, guess what they're going to do? They're going to run around to hit a forehand off that feed, or they're going to run around and hit a backhand. And it kind of gives you a clue of like, ooh, okay, this person probably likes this. So that's my first one. Let someone else chime in.
I think if they don't take volleys, if they don't take overheads in the warm-up, a lot of times that can be an indication. Maybe you want to move them forward. Maybe you want to see what their volleys and overheads, maybe they don't feel comfortable at the net. I think that's a big one too. You want to take one more?
Yeah, I mean, it's a fine line. Like you want to kind of poke and prod a little bit and make them try to hit different shots if possible. But at the same time, you want to find a little bit of a rhythm for yourself too. So if you spend the whole warm up like hitting like random shots back and forth, different spins, different heights, different widths, then it's tough for yourself to get into a rhythm and feel comfortable about the match starting. But on the other hand, if all you do is focus on yourself and try to get into a groove and hit your own favorite shots and you ignore your opponent, then you're going to miss a lot of things. So I would say watch for how quickly they go to slice is a big one. Like if they get just pulled out from the middle just a tiny bit and they immediately go to slice, it's something you should be paying attention for. Do they ask for overheads? This is more of a doubles thing. It always kind of shocked me when doubles players would take a couple volleys and then just go back to the baseline during a warm-up. Like and they didn't even hit before this warm-up. It's like, okay, like lob that guy like first or girl. But look for that in singles as well. Do they even take volleys? But if they do take volleys, do they take overheads? I think is a big thing to look for. What else?
Spazzy strokes.
Sure.
Like if you see some stroke that it looks like if you've ever watched Aliens and the thing pops out of your chest. I mean, if you see a stroke like that that's like dangling everywhere, I go there first. Doesn't necessarily mean it's their weak shot, but if I see something that's really spazzy, I'm gonna test it out, especially under pressure.
Yeah.
I think also low and high balls, paying attention to if they're backing up or if they're taking the ball on the rise. You can kind of tell whether you're going to be able to maybe get some short balls out of the high balls as well as low balls. Do they go to the slice, as Ian was saying, or do they step up and try to hit topspin? I think that also coincides with grips. If you can see that they have some crazy forehand grips, like full Western,
like this, then
you can't hit a low ball. So, that's something to really pay attention to as well. Same thing on the backhand. If they're full all the way on the other side, can't hit a low ball. So,
or vice versa. If their hand is way up towards the top, then more than likely they really dislike high balls. So, definitely, the grips one is a good one.
Okay, so I have a couple other questions. You want me to go?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. Mohammed, how can I limit my opponent to play high spin balls, especially when they land deep in the court, which force me to take steps back, which consume my power within time, specifically when with that kind of deep ball, so I can keep entering the court? I think he's saying like when they push him back with that high topspin ball, how can you get yourself back and recover inside the court after that ball's coming at you?
You've got a couple of options, Mohammed. One, if you're playing an opponent who consistently pushes you high and deep, there's a couple options you have to avoid getting pushed back in the first place. One, Kevin mentioned earlier, that is taking the ball out of the air. In particular, if you're playing somebody who hits very high, spinny, loopy shots, there's nothing that says you have to let that ball bounce. And so different players have different comfort levels with this, but I would highly recommend developing your ability to take the ball out of the air either with a traditional volley or with a swing volley, both from a couple of steps inside the baseline and all the way up through no man's land. Develop that ability because it's a great tool to have when you're playing somebody who's a moonballer or a lobber or whatever you want to call it, somebody who hits high, spinny, deep shots. Your other main option is to take the ball on the rise, meaning if the ball is landing right up next to the baseline, just let the ball come up to your strike zone and make contact there before it gets way up out of your strike zone, forcing you to retreat back towards the fence, which pulls you way out of position. So those are two tools on the rise. We have tutorials for both of these, and swing volley or deep transition volley, whatever you want to call it, or whichever style you want to develop are two really good tools. There's other footwork stuff too that maybe Kevin or Megan will talk about.
Good.
Okay.
But those are two ways to preempt the high, deep, spinny ball.
I think the biggest thing is it just depends upon how comfortable you are coming in and taking the ball out of the air. Like he said, if you can really work on taking the swinging volley or volley as you move forward, it can help you, but also on the rise, like getting comfortable taking the ball on the rise so you can neutralize the point, which I think is actually a side note. A lot of people think that taking the ball on the rise is an offensive shot. And unless you're significantly inside the court, it's more of a neutral shot. If you're standing behind the baseline, don't try to offensively hit the ball on the rise because you're most likely going to make a lot of errors. So I think it's very important to understand that taking the ball on the rise from behind the baseline is more of a neutral ball, and you're just neutralizing the point and getting yourself back in the point. So I think that's probably the biggest.
No, I think you guys covered the main stuff. I think it's just important to think about, like you're saying, how to neutralize, how to take balls out of the air. Again, I think about if the ball's not too high early in the rally, I actually try to bring them in. I want to see if they can volley instead of maybe kind of taking more. I look at it as a risk reward. If I have to take the ball on the rise and I'm behind the baseline and I mess up, well, they get rewarded and I have to take more risk to continue the strategy. So over a long period of time, I'm like, God, I don't know if I want to do this because I'm not being that successful. And if I, let's say if I feel comfortable taking the ball out of the air, great. But if I don't feel comfortable, guess what? I want to bring them to net and see if I can kind of turn the tables into a situation where I might not feel as comfortable hitting the slice, but they might feel even more uncomfortable having to come to net and hit a volley. So maybe the kind of flip side.
I've got a good question here. I'm curious to hear your guys' response on. I'm not sure on the name here. Is it Jesus or Jesus?
Jesus.
What can I do to slow the match down and get my opponent out of his rhythm?
Oh.
I think it's a really interesting question.
I can tell you. I think some of the biggest
a little bit of gamesmanship here, possibly on the way.
Well, this is interesting because yesterday I think
I don't mean you. Like I'm gonna give some gamesmanship.
Well, I mean, like yesterday I posted a thing on Facebook about things that opponents do that can kind of distract the other player and what's morally like in the bounds and what's not.
It's tricky.
And it was interesting to hear people's responses. But I think some of the biggest things to slow play down is, really you have so much time in between points. I think people don't realize, and so much time on changeovers, especially between sets. So you want to take as much time as you need. And very rarely, unless you are playing at a national high level USTA match, are you going to have umps on the court that are going to be managing that time. So, take all the time you need and slow down, turn your back in between points, go to the back fence, use your towel, look at your strings, slow down, everything slow down. I think that is probably one of the biggest things. And if you are one of those players that rushes when you're starting to play well, I think that can really affect play, is if every single time you're taking 10 to 15 seconds behind the curtain, wiping your face and slowing everything down.
Yeah, I think controlling tempo is really important. It's something that I didn't really think about. I really was totally oblivious to it until a doubles match in college that I played with somebody who played way above me on the team for reasons we ended up getting paired together. And I think what Megan was just talking about is really smart. You've got a lot more time than you think you do. And basically the way you should be thinking about this is the following. If you're in control of the match, if the momentum is with you, then you should be working actively to keep things moving, like keep the momentum flowing in your favor. And so when we were ahead, when we just broke, for example, and there's a chance for a changeover, we just walk over to the other side of the court, like go to our spots and just like bounce around and just like look at our opponents, like, all right, let's go. Like, and just try to keep things moving. Not that you're doing it really directly, but little cues will probably influence what your opponents are doing and the pace and the tempo that they play at. So if you're mindful of it, you can do a lot to influence what's happening in the match. Now, on the other hand, if you just got broken or the momentum is heavily with your opponent, what Megan just talked about is key. Being mindful of how much time you really have, use all of it as much as possible to try to break them out of that pattern that they're in of just winning. Something that I can't officially condone, but
but I'm going to tell you about.
But that my doubles partner in this one match did was like he picked up a ball and like dropped it and like kicked it like a court down, and he's like, "Come here," and we just like walked to get the ball and we like talked about stuff. And bought us like 30 seconds. I mean, again, I don't officially like condone that, but
it was used.
Any little thing you can do to break up their rhythm when you're behind or keep things rolling when you're ahead can really have a big influence over the match. So it's just something to think about.
No, I mean, you guys went into depth. Yeah, totally agree with it. I had it happen to me. I played a futures in Florida, and this guy was really good, but absolutely annoying. So if you know who you are, you mentally crushed me that day. And what he did was he controlled the tempo of the match because I think he was within time, but he went to every ball at this pace, no matter what.
Yeah.
And if a ball rolled onto the court, he would say, "Stop, I need to go get that ball," and literally would not increase his pace. And it drove me. I didn't even focus on the match. I was more trying to peg him with every shot I had a chance, and it just, he killed me. He was already a great player, but I mean, mentally he destroyed me. So
there's a guy that was known for that, Travis, if you know who you are.
Yeah, Travis. But this is another guy
for that in the juniors too.
Yeah, this is another guy that was at a whole nother level of just death and like evilness. But
also, I think even like, and this is something that I would never condone as well.
Although never condones come out.
But if a lot of people, it drives them crazy if they serve and the ball's out and you always hit it back. That drives people nuts. So if it does drive them nuts, it might be something in your favor. But again, like I said, it's not something I condone. But if you want the pace to keep going, don't hit the return every time the ball is back either. Like, let it go past you and just keep going with the pace that is going on. So,
James in the YouTube comments said medical timeout. Like, and that like, I don't want to, name any names,
we're going down the dark hole.
But that's exactly what's happening out there when you're watching on TV frequently. Of course, sometimes it's legitimate, medical need, but I don't want to put a percentage to it, but a large percentage of the time is just it's momentum management, and they're trying to slow things down. It's 100% accurate, and something I would put under the category of gamesmanship. Like it's technically within the rules. Yeah, you just want to be careful about how much you abuse it.
Got one from BobO, who's been asking, how do you play against players who come to net often? And I don't want to say you don't see that a lot, but there are a lot of players who still like to come to net. First, again, with everything I think I'm talking about, I think you have to examine what type of player you are. So like if someone comes to net on me, I don't mind it because I like having a target at net. It sounds like you don't like having a target. So I would say, first of all, my first instinct is, again, I'm going back to the same thing, beat the horse, or was it beat the cow, the horse? Don't beat anything. Beat the dead horse off this morning. But
Does that mean if it's alive, it's okay?
I mean, hey, that's another dark hole we're not going into.
Yeah.
But I think theory of opposites, if they like coming in, I want to hopefully take the net away from them. So what that means is early in the point, maybe I chip and charge before they do. Maybe I approach and come in. Maybe I lob it to their backhand and sneak in. And suddenly now they can't come to net. So I'm looking at just taking it completely away from them. If they do get a chance to come to net, my first thing is like, always make them volley, because I feel like players, when people come to net, they freak out and they try to go for this insane passing shot. Two-shot passing shot is, probably 80%, 90% of the time. I dip it low to their feet, cross court, and if I do a good job of that, they're going to probably pop the ball up. And then if I get a chance to move inside the court, then I go for a better shot because I'm closer to net. If I go to low to their feet, they hit it back to me deep, I go low to their feet again and keep this battle of like, I'm going to get it low until you pop it up. And usually by one or two shots, something's going to happen. Something's going to break. Either I go too high and they finish the shot, or I went low enough to give me an opportunity. And I'm working with them being in the net. I'm trying to get the opportunity of being inside the baseline to do something. So There we go.
I think I have a question that kind of goes along that. Sean wants to know, what do you do against an opponent who has zero patterns of play? And who is always changing direction, always repeatedly going for the low percentage shot, and they actually beat you? What do you just say congrats and well played, or what else can they do?
Give the old racket clap. Yeah. If they purposefully use low percentage patterns and just make it like for 2 whole sets, then shake their hand and say good match. Like all you can really do at that point is try to give them one more opportunity to mess up. One more opportunity to try to miss that low percentage pattern. And if they just continue to nail it over and over, then that's called somebody who's better than you. If you don't have anything to neutralize it, then that's just the reality of that opponent. What was the other part of it?
Just changing direction, no patterns of play.
Yeah, no patterns of play can be tough, but I think it's only really a big hurdle if you don't have a really solid understanding in your mind of what your patterns are. Meaning, if they're just playing random shots and you're just responding with a hit it where they're not kind of mindset, then the tendency is going to be for you to just be hitting random shots too. And so if you get sucked into that random strategy, then you're kind of playing their game at that point. So I think when somebody doesn't follow any particular purpose or pattern, or they don't have any particular intelligence about what they're doing with the ball, that's when it's most critical for you to know exactly what you're doing and why and when. And so having a solid plan A in mind is super critical at that point, and adhering to it and let them try their random stuff and let them self-destruct. That's when it's most important for you to be really solid about what you're doing and why. Question from Logan, I think is interesting, a little bit of mental tennis in here. Logan said, can you talk about the 5-2?
Oh my God.
The 5-2 curse. I absolutely hate being up like that and choking.
Totally.
Kevin, is there a 5-2 curse?
I think there's a 5-2 curse. We've talked about it before. I think a lot of times here's what happens, whether you call it a 5-2 curse or whatnot, it's about losing presence. So usually when you're up 5-2, what do you think? Well, what do most players start thinking about? This set's in the bag, baby. Second set, but you're still in the first set. So you've lost your focus on the present situation. You're already in the future celebrating. And what happens is your strategy, whatever you're doing, you stop doing it because you're already thinking about, hey, I'm just going to keep some balls in randomly and they're going to give it to me. And guess what? Boom, you're in a dogfight. For me, the 5-2 curse is when I get up 5-2, I want to hyper focus on doing what got me there and continue to do that. A lot of times what I do is I pretend that I'm actually down 5-2, because when you're down 5-2, and this is another position, what do you think about? oh God, I'm totally not going to win this. Or I don't have the ability to think about winning the set because I'm down 5-2. Who thinks about winning a set when you're down 5-2? You think about that point and you're like, I got to stay alive. I need to win this point. They are very present. So it's a shift in presence. And that's why usually at 5-2, you see a lot of comebacks because the person up 5-2 is like, I got it. And the first person down 5-2 is like survival. I got to win this point. And then they win another point and they win another point. And then you have this whiplash. And then usually what happens around 5-4, the person who was like up goes, oh crap, I'm not going to win this thing. And they come back and the person who's worked their way back is like, yeah, here we go. I can maybe get this set. And they change your focus. So it's really about staying focused in the present about the strategies and tactics that have got you up. And if you're down, figuring out how you can survive to get yourself to a point where you can hopefully do something.
Yeah, I think I don't have a lot to add to that. I think Kevin described it really perfectly. When players think it's in the bag, they let their foot off the gas. And that's the exact moment in time when the person who's down in the set is the most focused. They've got the most concentration and they're playing their absolute best because they know if they've got their 4 points away from losing the set. And so that's when they're playing like with the most intensity, the most focus. And so if the person who's up lets their foot off the gas, both those things happen at the same time. That's why there tends to be a big flip in momentum. So I think Kevin's phrase of remaining present is the most important element there. He also talked about just playing 1 point at a time, which is what the player who's down tends to do. Player who's up does not do. So yeah, I think that's perfect. Should around the net shots be banned? Absolutely not. If you have the opportunity to hit around the net, yeah, that's like a once in a lifetime opportunity for a lot of players.
I think
you guys both converted on that around the post.
I think I've done one.
I never
in doubles that like I was like super pumped. Like it was just like you get pulled out wide and you hit it. And I mean, the moment you hit it, it's a come on. I mean, it's like the end of the match.
100%.
Come on.
When you realize it's about to line up, it's like, oh my gosh. And everybody on the court like knows it. Like, oh man, there's about to be an opportunity.
No way.
I never did it until practice in college, and I did it twice in that same practice.
Oh wow.
I never did my whole life until that day, and I converted twice on it.
Only in doubles.
It's like the drop shot that goes over and comes back.
I've had a couple of those.
Oh yeah,
I've had a couple.
I've never. I don't think I've ever done that.
I've only done it once.
Yeah,
but those are the ones that stick out in your mind.
I'll give a plug. Did you do it on
purpose, or did you shank it?
No, I totally did it on purpose. Like
I've never tried it on purpose.
I had one kid. I'll give you some love. Connor Finnerty. We were playing a team match. This is doubles. Kid goes for the shot on match point and executes.
Post or the over and back?
Over and back. Sorry, there was the didn't go for it maybe on purpose. On memories, the ball's going back and forth. He goes for a volley, hits it like this. This is match point.
Wait, down match point or up match point?
We're up match point.
Wow.
Hits the volley like this, goes over net and comes back for match point, and we're like, no way. It's like one of those moments. So yeah, gotta love it.
Okay, I have a question. Chris wants to know, can we get some specific opportunities when you would want to change directions and specific opportunities when you want to hit high to the backhand?
Second one, every opportunity. You want to talk about changing directions?
Change directions. Do you want to talk about both or you want to do backhand?
That's basically my answer on high to the backhand. Like you should be doing that all the time.
I think high to backhand's good. There's these how do I want to describe it? Types of players who actually love their backhands, and I've played a couple of them, and they don't mind the high to the backhand. So it's interesting if you try to go high to the backhand, they actually just watch out if you do have one of those players. So I would say times that you want to change directions is generally I think of. First of all, when I think of changing directions, I think that's you got to define that first. I think too many players, when we say, hey, this is time to change directions, that people think that when I change directions and they hit from, let's say, here to here. Yeah, you like that? Okay. Sorry, the marker wasn't working. They're thinking changing directions, and like literally they're thinking of aiming 2 or 3 feet away from the sideline. And that's not a change of direction in my book. That's like a disaster waiting to happen.
Disaster.
So the first thing I want to think about, is this our rag for today? Or is this just a shirt?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so first thing I want to talk about.
Should players practice their disaster shots, Kevin?
they shouldn't practice their disaster shots, but you should practice changing directions. So when I think about changing directions, I think about the court in this kind of fashion here. And when I'm thinking about changing directions, I'm thinking about trying to hit the ball in this lane here. It's a change of direction. I'm not thinking about trying to hit the ball so close. And this might be a little bit too far over, but I'm definitely giving myself tons of margin. And even I made the mistake of making the circle too close to the baseline. I think of changing and trying to get away from that sideline. And I think of making sure I have enough margin away from the sideline and the baseline, first of all. The second thing is usually when I'm thinking of when I change on a ball that maybe doesn't have a lot of pace on it, that I can actually get set up. I don't think about changing directions when I'm running off the side of the court, because now I have to hit inside the court and I'm leaving too much court open. Okay. I like to change directions when, let's say I'm running over and I'm in this position here to maybe change. And now I don't have as much court to cover. So that's one other thing. Generally, I like to change when I'm set up. I don't like to change when I'm losing my balance or I'm kind of struggling to the ball, because generally if I'm already struggling to the ball and I go down the line, I'm just going to open the court up. And I like to say, if I'm in this player and someone does that to me, you're going to be my track star. Because I'm just going to run you from side to side, or I'm going to run you across the court if you change directions at the wrong time. So those are my kind of general rules. Basically, if I'm set up, if the ball doesn't have as much pace, the times I don't is when I'm off the court or when the ball has a lot of pace on it. So
I think one of the biggest things too is when you're inside the baseline.
Yeah.
Like if you're standing behind the baseline, it is not the best time to change direction most of the time. There are, times where that could be. But in general, if you're behind the baseline, then you want to make sure you're still going cross court. But if you're inside the baseline and you're in control of the point, that's the time where you can change direction. I always think about it, that figure 8 drill?
Yeah.
Where you're going cross court and I'm going down the line. You got to think about which person do you want to be, and you never want to be the person that's going down the line the whole time. And there's a reason for that, is because when you're going cross court, you have so much more angle to move the person outside the court. That person's doing so much more running than the person that is going cross court every time.
No.
So I mean, you don't want to be the person that's going down the line every single time, because you're going to be doing way more running than the person that's going cross court. So you kind of want to play like that.
No, totally agree with that. And at a high level, because I think sometimes people hear us just talk about cross court, cross court, cross court, cross court. You look at the pros sometimes, and what situation I think happens there, they'll maybe go 2 cross court and 1 down line. Because at that level, when you take 2 balls to the same direction, if you don't do any damage, that person that, let's say, if I'm hitting Federer 2 balls in the same spot on the forehand, I'm in trouble. And so at that level, they're going 2, nothing's happened, and they're doing a change. If you really watch closely, they're not hitting the ball like super close to the baseline. Yeah. Because if they hit it too close to the baseline, you still create this angle. And they want to manage that, hey, I've went 2 balls here, and now I'm going to go here because maybe I'm trying to either get away, not hit a 3rd ball to Federer's forehand, you know what's going to happen, or I want to test out the backhand side and see if I can get into a backhand rally. So as you go up in level, if you hit too many balls in the same location, you're going to probably get hurt. So just measure what level you're at, because sometimes just going cross court is good enough.
Well, okay. So I think to go along your idea, one drill that's really good to work on that, to where you're not just hitting the ball cross court. So many times we put cones here if you have a ball machine, if you're hitting on a ball machine or whatever, and you just are working on this one shot. And you're just hitting cross court over and over and over. But actually, if you can work on hitting maybe your first ball cross court is here, and then you're also working on this second one that's going to be a little bit more angle. That way, when this person's hitting the first ball, they're here. But when they're hitting the second ball, they're here. Then that gives you more opportunity to actually change direction and go down the line. Because I think a lot of times when we're practicing, we're just practicing only hitting in this area, where actually I think hitting in this area and then hitting in this area opens up the opportunity to where you can actually step inside the court and hit a higher percentage change direction ball. So, okay, erase all my.
All right, I got a bunch of questions.
Yeah, questions are coming.
Where's the one? From Cindy. Power or spin when playing people who are in a lower level? I'm having trouble with those opponents.
Power, spin, does she mean hitting power?
She's asking which is better, power or spin, when playing somebody who's not as good as you.
Spin is my simple answer. because I say it's higher percentage, and a lot of people at a low level have trouble when they don't understand that topspin on the ball. I'm assuming she's saying topspin. Actually, you could talk about backspin too.
She just said spin.
But if you're talking topspin, a lot of people understand that the ball, once it hits the ground, it picks up pace and keeps going. So they have trouble with judging that. Where a hard ball is going to be lower percentage.
Yeah, I'd actually agree. If I only get those two choices, if you're kind of putting me in a box, just because spin's going to create more margin, it's going to bounce higher. If you use underspin, backspin, or underspin and then topspin, you can mix up it just is a little bit more dynamic as far as the different things you can do. You can use spin to roll someone off the court, to back someone away from the court on the baseline. You can use underspin to throw off their timing. Power means I just have to time the ball better, and it's just about speed. And it's going to get harder if, let's say, Megan's hitting high spin to me and I'm hitting power. I'm betting on Megan. Just this once.
Cindy, I'm going to go outside the box a little bit. I'm going to say whichever one is your normal rally ball. Because I don't know what level you are, what your style of play is. So if you're like a flat ball hitter, then you should be hitting flat balls. And you should be playing high percentage patterns and making your opponent do something to actively beat you. I think a lot of intermediate to lower level players have a big hang up with players that aren't as good as them. And I think they're taking too much responsibility on themselves to beat that player. Like, oh, this player's not as good, so I should be hitting like 50 winners over the next 2 sets. And that's ridiculous. You should be flipping that responsibility and putting it on the part of your opponent, on the side of your opponent, and saying, okay, you want to beat me? Go ahead. You have to actually beat me. Like, you have to actually hit winners instead of thinking you're the one that should be hitting winners. So if slice is your rally ball, hit slice all day and make them come up with winner after winner to beat you. If flat drive is your rally ball, then hit flat drives and just stick with what's comfortable for you and make your opponent come up with the goods. And if they are, okay, now we've got a different kind of match and you need to kind of take control a little bit more. But remember, most points end with a mistake. So don't feel like you should be doing something to blow them off the court because you're the better player. I think that's a risky mindset to have.
It's a good answer.
Mm-hmm.
It's a good answer.
Yeah, you crushed my answer. I'm not gonna lie.
I don't know.
Look who's competitive.
And one.
No, but I think
we should have a tally up here for maybe we can do that next time.
But I think Ian brings up
the chat vote on
the like we're
answer
taking
best answer.
We can compete. It'll get crazy in here, but I think Ian brings up a really interesting thing that we all have to consider when we're asking these questions, and singles, especially singles, because it's just one person, is that it's very easy to, especially for us, for anyone to hear these answers, and we forget to take what we hear and put it through the lens of our game. And that's so important that you understand that, our response is usually probably the lens of my personal game or Megan's or Ian's, but it's also really important to think about what's your game? What do you like doing? And taking an assessment of like, hey, well, Kevin said I should come to net, but I don't like hitting volleys. Then you probably shouldn't come to net. You have to figure out another kind of way of winning. So it's figuring out kind of what cards you've been dealt and how you can play those cards the best with whatever answer we give you.
Mm-hmm. All right, we got like just 2 or 3 minutes left. So this is your last opportunity for questions. Do you have any good ones on deck, or do you want me to? I've got a couple. Okay. Interesting one here from Christian. What are some strategies to keep from overthinking my play? If I'm playing bad, I tend to change things up, like my grip, my swing speed, etc., and I start overthinking like crazy. Any ideas to share?
Not overthinking.
I think
and if he's playing badly, he's mixing up all kinds of stuff. Yeah, grip, swing speed.
I think it goes back to when we talked about patterns of play, where if you're under pressure and things start going crazy, keeping it simple. Simple tennis. That's going to be your plan A. Your always go-to plan if things are not going the way that you had thought they should be or that you want them to be. Always go back to simple tennis. And I also think rituals play a huge part of that, giving you that when you're under pressure, that you can feel comfortable if you have certain rituals in play. Whether it be before you serve, you do something specific, or before you return, you do something specific, or on changeovers, you do something specific. Between points, you do something specific. And something that is just an example of that would be between points, going back, wiping your face with your towel, fixing your strings, going back, bounce the ball a couple times, and then you go back to the serve. So I think it's important on when you are under pressure and not changing grips, not changing swing paths, no technique changes. Someone asked me that the other day, when you're under pressure, do you change your technique? And I would say no, that's not the time to change your technique. Change your technique
Let's
and
throw
practice.
more variables in.
When you're in match play situation, I would say hardly ever change technique of anything, because it's too hard to think about that. But going back, simple tennis and rituals.
Yeah, I agree 100%. Yeah, the last thing you want is more stuff to manage. Again, beating a dead horse here. Most points end in an error. So if you're like, oh man, I don't feel comfortable right now, let's try a different grip. Let's try a different swing. Like, no, that's the exact opposite direction you should be going in. So yeah, I agree with Megan completely. You should be taking things away, limiting yourself more to just the basics. And so for you, technically, I don't know what that means, but you need to try to get yourself into a groove where you're comfortable as quickly as possible. And changing grip and swing speed and other stuff is the last thing that's going to result in comfort. There's no chance.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I don't want to beat a dead horse.
Or a cow.
Or a cow.
Don't beat a dead cow either. It's not.
I'm going to change the whole thing.
Yeah.
Starting here now.
You heard it here first. Beating a dead cow. We're in Wisconsin. Any final questions, Megan?
I kind of just answered this a little bit for Oliver in the chat, but how important is it to hold the baseline? I know when we were watching Federer play, replay a little bit, he did a good job of holding the baseline, where he's saying like Rafa, he's way back there and still can destroy his opponents.
I think it's kind of going through what we talked about, is going through the lens of what you can do. It's not important to hold the baseline if you can't be successful holding the baseline. And if Roger has that ability to play closer and take time away and do it consistent enough that he's successful. If you're doing something you're not successful at, especially in a match situation, and there's kind of no point in doing it. You have to kind of find the right fit for your level, your ability to find a plan that you can execute, that you can win points on. So I think that's important. Rafa's going, hey, you know what? I'm behind the baseline. I have more time to set up and hit my shots. Sweet. But yeah, sweet. I can hit a better quality shot. Roger's like, hey, I can move inside because I don't want to be way behind. So they're assessing these things through the lens of what they do best and how much damage they can do based on their court position. So I think that's really important.
In their game style.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
All right, with that, we're going to wrap things up. Thank you all so much for being here. We appreciate your time, your attention. Thank you for all the amazing questions, both on Facebook and also on YouTube. We're going to try our best to continue doing these every Wednesday. So if we didn't get to your question today, apologize, but you can sign on again and join us a week from today, or whenever you're watching this coming Wednesday. Any final thoughts on singles?
On singles, I think, again, one of the biggest things is that when you think about singles, you have to assess what you do the best, what you don't do so good. And it's really about, when you're playing, figuring out what's the right combination. And I think there's two schools of thought that make it really quick. It's like, first school of thought is, how can I beat my opponent? How can I play better than them? How can I like just go after them? The second school of thought is, how can I pull their game down through the mud? It sounds bad, but they're two valid strategies, and you have to weigh with everybody what's going to work best. And that's all I think singles is about. We're talking about specific tactics you use, but all these tactics and strategies is just setting up a combination of where I'm doing something that's going to put you in like if I'm playing you, put you in a bad situation, or I'm going to pull you down so you can't do what you do best and I can win points. So think about it that way. kind of the overarching thing for singles play.
You
Pull 'em
nasty,
through the
Kevin.
mud.
I think also
dead
it's
horse.
really about paying attention
It's a
to
dead cow.
what's working and what's not. Like it really boils down to, I'm doing this pattern of play and it's working, keep doing it. I'm doing this pattern of play and it's not working, my opponent is crushing me, change it up. And like I said, don't change grips, technique, weird stuff like that, but change up your pattern of play. So pay attention to what's working and pay attention to what's not working. Like that is your goal in doubles and singles, but especially in singles, will shine through for sure.
Pay attention. That's the best way of just saying it. Just pay attention.
Kirby, by the way, was not here today. She's attending to some family matters, but hopefully she'll be back next week.
We miss you, Kirby.
We do miss you.
Yep, absolutely. Not the same without Kirby. So thank you, everybody. Appreciate your participation today, and we'll catch you on the next live stream.
Woohoo!
Bye.